Hey, Josh. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi. Am I co-host today?
No, I had down that Josh was.
Oh, okay. Somehow I thought I was. When's my, you don't have my list, right?
I don't have it in
Not
front
the
of me.
list. Okay, good. I don't have to pay as much attention.
Right.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hello,
Hey,
Shabbat Shalom.
how are you?
Good. I signed my son up for a vaccine next Saturday. At 6
Oh, okay. Good.
He's working in person at the FBI he works for Booz Allen.
Uh-huh.
So they gave them a letter that they're essential. I said, yeah, they should be putting needles in your arms and not giving you letters. They don't know how to, these young guys, they don't know how to set up appointments.
Yeah.
They should be vaccinating them.
Yeah. Well, we actually have 2 appointments set up for Eitan next week because he's working at camp this summer. Camp sent out letters to all the people working at camp. You need to be vaccinated.
Right.
For the summer. So he has one at CVS on Monday, and just in case he has one at CVS in Hyattsville, just in case he has one at Adventist in Tacoma Park on Tuesday.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. Like Walgreens would say they had availability, then when you went on the site, it wouldn't work. And even with Six Flags, it took me 45 minutes or an hour on Wednesday. Because I got the first one and then it said error, and then it would error the whole time. And I just was so angry. I just said, I'm going to keep trying.
Yep. It's been very frustrating.
It's a horrible system.
It is. Shabbat shalom, Julian.
Shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Julian.
I'll be quiet now. So where can we find the list of where we signed up? Because I don't remember. Maybe we wrote it.
It's a Zoom. No, it's a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet. So I sent it to you as an attachment in an email.
Okay, I'll look back.
Yeah.
What I signed up for. Okay.
So I got my mom a vaccine shot, the first vaccine shot.
Oh, good. Very good.
So I took her there. There wasn't a wait. And we, she got the vaccine. She went into the waiting room, and then the nurse came over to check on her.
Yeah.
And she started this 15-minute long campaign. My son is my caretaker. He needs to be vaccinated too.
Right.
And it went from I'm sorry, it's whatever the policy at the front is. So, okay, fine, I'll take his name.
Right.
And if there are any openings. Well, that very afternoon, I got a call.
You're kidding?
No.
Wow.
No. And they said, we have one extra dose that wasn't used. And
my goodness. That's great.
It was
very good. Very good. A mother is always a mother.
Yes, right. It's purely due to my mother. If she weren't, the whole situation was due to her. So
yes. A Jewish mother on top of that.
Yeah. Yes.
Very good. Very good.
Where was this, Josh?
This was
Josh, where was it?
On Briggs Cheney Road at the recreation center in Silver Spring. Yeah.
I'm supposed to go to Six Flags tomorrow, but I've been hearing ugly stuff about it.
Well, just yesterday, somebody said that there was a long line, but hopefully, Paul said it was easy. Danny Ben said it was easy. So hopefully it will be.
Yasher Koach on the Kiddush last night, Julian.
Oh,
beautiful voice.
Thank you.
Are you back to normal? Are you?
Not quite. I still have trouble getting up, and but once I'm up, I can walk okay. I'm not walking beautifully, but I can walk okay.
Yeah.
And I'm
Are you-
certainly not doing any running.
Are you still doing physical therapy or?
I'm gonna start doing physical therapy.
Yeah.
I haven't done any since rehab, but I'm gonna go see somebody.
Great.
I'm actually gonna go see Stan's son, who's a doctor of physical therapy.
Oh,
That's right. You have your choice now. You can see Stan's son or Dennis K's son.
Right. Or Cheryl.
Or Carol. That's right. We got a lot of physical
yeah.
therapists in the congregation.
Yeah, but I don't do outpatients, sorry, and that's all they'd cover. So is Zach working now?
I think so, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think he's working in, because he just got certified or licensed
Right.
several weeks ago. So I think it's someplace in DC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Shabbat Shalom, David. Shabbat Shalom, Jules.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Gary.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Oh, and
God
Judy,
live.
also Judy also, right?
We had our thingy today, but you're okay.
What thingy?
The
Oh, yes. Go live on live stream. Yeah, I don't know what, but I have a piece of paper in front of me. It's right under my computer stand, and even that, it depends. I have to be looking at it and not distracted by talking about the Phillies or something like that. Audrey, Shabbat Shalom. George,
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Rita.
Shabbat Shalom. How are you?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Good. Your boys are really growing. I've been watching them maturing.
They, they keep growing. They just keep growing. Yep.
Thank God.
Jones, come here.
Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
It looks like you just got
Shabbat
out of the
Shalom.
shower. Did you?
Got to be clean for Shabbos.
That's right.
Rabbi? Is there Jonah?
Yeah. Which Jonah?
Okay. I'm Jonah Layman.
Yeah, yeah.
Rabbi. We should say Rabbi. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But since you're a year younger than my oldest daughter, I take it for okay. I'm a refugee, and Hayas did help us.
Yes.
In fact, so I don't know if you knew that. If you want me to do anything or say anything.
We have someone else as a guest speaker who actually it's Naomi and
That's right.
David Mendick's daughter who's speaking today.
Oh, yes.
But I will keep that in touch and keep that in mind for next year.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think Hayas also helped the Edlins with the Egyptian Jews getting out of Egypt, going to France, and then coming to America. I think Hayas was. So we have a number of people in the
Yeah,
congregation.
they didn't sponsor us because we had mishpacha here. But they did help. I remember a social worker came to me when I was in a sanitarium in Germany. I'll never forget her. She brought me arts and crafts things, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom, dear.
Shabbat Shalom, Mom and Dad.
David, are you still visiting? Are you?
That's what I said. It's David. David doing here. He's not in my house anymore.
No, I'm in Florida now.
Oh, you're in Florida. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm with my parents.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's beautiful
Hi,
out
David.
today.
hi, David. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
And love to Judy too.
Yeah, she's sleeping.
Oh,
How
okay.
you guys doing? Okay?
Yep, you too.
Very good. Yeah,
Good.
Say hi to your parents.
I will. I will.
Whatever.
The beauty of a Zoom community.
Yep.
Florida, Philly,
Carol
everywhere in between.
loves.
I'll be on from California in a couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
That's why I whispered to you.
Yeah, even so,
Okay.
nobody hears it.
Doesn't matter.
Get started momentarily.
Hear him.
In a couple of weeks, Cantor Adina and I will have to get used to being back in the building. As well as start having some B'nai Mitzvah in the building.
Good.
Good.
Oh, really?
Been lots.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
What are we doing with the
You could
magnifying?
clone yourself, Jonah.
Josh, what's with the magnifying glass?
You could clone yourself and put
Yeah, I
one
could say
picture
myself,
here,
yeah.
and one there.
all right, folks, it's 9:30 and we're ready to get started. I'm going to mute all. And Cantor Adina, unmute yourself. And we will get started with Shochenad in the Lev Shalem. We're on page 147. In the Sim Shalom, we're on page 105.
Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo.
Shochenad marom v'kadosh shemo.
וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני, לישרים נבע תהילה, בפי ישרים תתהלל, ובדברי צדיקים תתברך, ובלשון חסידים תתרומם, ובקרב קדושים תתקדש. חלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל. שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, להלל ולקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. ברכות ויהודות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודות אדוני נפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אל חי העולמים.
If we can, we rise for Chatzi Kaddish, 148 in Lev Shalem, 106 in Sim Shalom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותך, וימליך מלכותך בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכו בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. והשמך רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך תקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה בשירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Vaed.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל.
May be seated. We continue 150 in Lev Shalem, 107 in Sim Shalom.
אין כערכך ואין זולתך, אפס בלתך ומדומה לך. אין כערכך אדוני אלוהינו בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי העולם הבא. אפס בלתך גואלנו לימות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. אל אדון על כל המעשים, ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם דעת וחוכמה סובבים אותו. המתגאה אל חיות הקודש ונדר בכבוד על המרכבה, זכות ומשול לפני כיסו, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו. טובים מאורות שברא אלוהינו, יצרם בדעת בבינה ובהשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל, מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נאה זיוום בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים בהם הרצון קונם, פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו, צהלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו, קרא לשמש ויזרח אורה, והתקין צורת הלבנה, שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מרום, תפארת וגדולה, סרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש, לילה של שבת מכל המעשים.
We continue on the top of 152 and then on to 153 in Lev Shalem, the top of 109 and then on to 110 in Sim Shalom.
תתברך מושיענו השבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורעו שעשית יפארך סלה. רצו אל אמתנו וגואלנו בורא קדושים. וכולם פותחים את פיהם בקדושה ובטהרה, בשירה ובזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים ומפארים ומעריצים ומקדישים וממליכים את שם המלך הגדול הגיבור והנורא, קדוש הוא. וכולם מקבלים העול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה ובנימה קדושה, כולם כאחד עונים ואומרים ביראה, קדוש, קדוש, קדוש אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. והאופנים וחיות הקודש, ברעש גדול מתנשאים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. לאלו ברוך נמותיתנו. המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית כאמור, לעושה הורים גדולים כי לעולם חסדו. אור חדש על ציון תאיר, אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מהרה לאורו, מהרה לאורו. ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות, אהבה רבה אהבתנו אדוני אלוהינו.
Page 154 in Lev Shalem, 111 in Sim Shalom, we gather together our tzitzit in preparation for the Shema.
והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, ולא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בשועתך. והביאנו לשלום מארבע כנפות הארץ, ותוליכנו קוממיות, קוממיות לארצנו, כי אל ישות אתה, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך וליחדך, וליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ואהבת את את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
You continue the middle of page 156 in Lev Shalem, or the top of 113 in Sim Shalom.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם, ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. לדור ודור הוא קיים, ושמו קיים, וכיסאו נכון, ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת. אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם. מגן ומשיב. תהילות לאל עליון ברוך הוא מבורך, משה ומרים ובני ישראל לך הנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתח נאומך יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We start the Amida out loud, 159 in Lev Shalem, 115 in Sim Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים
וכדי ששמך בעולם כשם שמעתי שמעתו בשמי מרום כך כתוב ביד ויחקר זה אל זה ויאמר
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול מתנשאים לעומת צרפים לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. ואינו תירנה מלכותך כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך על ידי דוד משיח צדקך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Continue silently 162 to 166 in Lev Shalem, 117 to 120 and Sim Shalem. As we conclude our private prayers, we continue with Sim Shalom on 165 in Lev Shalem, or the top of 120 in Sim Shalom.
שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ישראל עמך. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד, באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, תורת חיים ואהבת חסד, אהבת חסד, וצדקה וברכה, ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ישראל עמך. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך, עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה, בשלומך. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
We continue with Kaddish Shalem, the full Kaddish, 167 in Lev Shalem, 138 in Sim Shalom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה, בעלמא דברך גדולתך וימליך מלכותך, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שם רבה מברך, לעולם ולעלמי עמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמך דקודשה, בריאו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא, ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותיהן ובאותיהן לכל ישראל, קדם אבוהן דבשמיא, ואמרו אמן. יש למה רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen.
We turn back in our Sidurim to the Psalm for Shabbat, found on page 112 in Lev Shalem, or page 72 in Sim Shalom.
היום יום שבת קודש, שבו היו הלוויים אומרים בבית המקדש, מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני לזמר שיר העליון, הודינו וון בסבע דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ולא עוולת בו.
Mourners and those observing yahrzeit to rise for Kaddish, found on page 121 in Lev Shalem or 82 in Sim Shalom. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Adi vrach irutei v'yamlik mafutei. V'chayachon of yomechon v'chayedachol beit Yisrael. V'agalav izman karivim ru amen.
Amen.
Eish mei rabbah mevorach le'olam ome'omaya. Barach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yidhadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu v'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlomo rabba mim shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May be seated. We turn our attention now to our Chumashim. Either you have the Eitz Chaim, and you can turn to page 523. The portion today is Kitisa, or whatever edition of Chumash you have. Look for Kitisa. It's Exodus chapter 30, beginning with verse 11. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. This portion, Kitisa, in some regard, in some ways, could be understood as foreshadowing really the behavior of the Israelite people throughout the rest of the Bible. That on the one hand, they are presented with a miracle or some other event that proves God's existence to the people, and the people respond by saying, yes, we believe. And then in the very next instant, the people turn 180 degrees in the opposite direction and turn to idolatry. We find that as a recurring theme throughout the Bible, in the book of Judges, the book of Samuel, a little bit, but mostly in the books of Kings and in all the prophets. One glaring example is the event of Elijah the prophet, who was on Mount Carmel trying to convince the people to turn back to God, and has a competition with the priests of Baal. Clearly, Elijah is able to invoke God's presence to consume the sacrifice on the altar, and the Baal priests, no matter what they do, cannot get their god Baal to consume their sacrifice. The people proclaim God is God, he is our God, but then in the very next chapter, seemingly the people return to idol worship. So here the people of Israel have just heard the Ten Commandments. It's just, even though it seems several portions ago, it is not that long ago in the life of the Israelites that they've had that experience at Mount Sinai, which is on top of the Exodus from Egypt, which is on top of the 10 plagues. So an entire series of miracles that were performed on their behalf, and yet here, Moses is delayed just a little bit. We don't know how long Moses is delayed. He had promised the people, I'll be back in 40 days after I learn the entire Torah from God and I can teach it to you. He is delayed, and the people immediately turn to Aaron, Moses' brother, to say, give us a substitute, give us this golden calf. It's fascinating that the rabbis many of the rabbis over the generations, the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, of the rabbinic Judaism that set the stage for Judaism as we know it, and other commentators suggest that perhaps the events as presented in the Torah were presented out of order. That here really the story of the golden calf, which happens in chapter 31 and 32, really happened before the two portions we just read, to Teruma and to Tzaveh, that we just read the past 2 weeks. That golden calf came first, and then the design and the construction of the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary, came as an atonement for the events of the golden calf. So the portion begins with a continuation of the last things that are to be designed for the Mishkan. We have the poll tax that we just read for Shabbat Shekalim a couple of weeks ago. This half shekel tax that was taken from all adult males above the age of 20 every year for the maintenance of the Mishkan. Washing lavers are described here as well. And then the commandment to observe Shabbat, all here in chapter 30. So Paul is going to read Torah for us this morning, and he'll read first, just the first 5 sentences of the portion, pages 523 and 524, this description of the half shekel tax. Go ahead, Paul.
Vaydaber Adonai Moshe lemor ki sisas rosh bnei Yisrael lifkudehem v'nos nu ish kofer nafsho Adonai b'vkodosam lo yeh bohem negeth b'vkodosam ze yitnu kol ha'over ol hapkudim machatzis shekel b'shekel hakodesh esrim gerah hashekel machatzis shekel truma l'Adonai kol ha'over hapkudim miben esrim shana v'mala yitain trumas Adonai ha'ashir lo yarbeh v'hadal lo yamid v'machatzis hashokel lo seises trumas Adonai l'chaper nafsho sechem Lokachta es kesef ha-kippurim me'es b'nei Yisrael v'nosata oso alavodaso hel moed v'hoya livnei Yisrael zikron livnei Adonai lechaper nafsho sechem.
So before Paul continues here, as the portion continues, like I said, there's a description here of the laver, this washing vessel that is to be designed. There's a midrash about that interpretation. That it's made out of copper, and this is the ancient form of mirrors as well. Before glass was commonly used, they would shine up the metal pretty well, and then use that as a mirror. So there's a midrash that these lavers, these washing stations that would be used to purify the Kohanim before work they'd be filled with water so that the Kohanim could wash hands with that water before participating in the sacrificial worship system, so that it's a highly it's crucial for spiritual purification. And according to the Midrash, these were the mirrors that the women used in Egypt, that they would ensure that the Israelite people would continue in the midst of dire slavery and oppression. The Midrash says that the Israelite women in slavery would still beautify themselves and make themselves attractive to their husbands, so that a next generation could be born. And from that, Moses wasn't so sure that these mirrors that were used for that purpose could be used for this spiritual purpose. And God said, absolutely, that there would be no people had the women not done that with those mirrors. And so we're going to use that now for this effect to the spiritual continuation of the people use those mirrors to make those lavers. Then a description of the incense and how that is to be made. And then in chapter 31, the appointment of Bezalel and Oholiab, one Bezalel from the tribe of Judah, Oholiab from the tribe of Dan, to be the chief designers and architects of the Mishkan, putting this design plan into reality. And then the conclusion of chapter 31 is the commandment to observe Shabbat. And from this, as I said in the Torah study earlier this week, it is from this presentation here, right at the end of everything that's described and how to build the Mishkan, we have the laws of Shabbat. For the rabbis, that means that everything that they understood about refraining from work on Shabbat is derived from work that would have been entailed in constructing the Mishkan. So when the rabbis derive that there are 39 categories of work from which all other work stems, that we should refrain from on Shabbat so that it becomes the day of rest, they learn those categories from work involved in building the Mishkan. Then chapter 32 begins the story of the golden calf. And as I mentioned in the Torah class, it's a fascinating midrash that the rabbis come up with, why Aaron is whitewashed by the rabbis. The Torah, God doesn't punish Aaron for his role in fashioning the golden calf, and therefore clearly there's a reason for Aaron to stay alive in the story, even though all the people who sung and danced around the golden calf were sentenced to death. Aaron, who made the golden calf, is not. And so the rabbis fashioned the story out of whole cloth, in that from words that are on page 531, chapter 32, verse 5, they create a story that perhaps Aaron saw the anger of the people and the intensity of the people and how much they wanted something to replace Moses. So even though the verse says, Vayar Aharon Vayiven Mizbeach, Aaron saw and built an altar, the rabbis changed the vowels under Vayiven Mizbeach to Vayavein Mizavuach, that Aaron saw and understood from the slaughtered. And they created a story about Hur, who we had heard of a few chapters before, who held up one of the people who held up Moses's arms in the battle against Amalek so that the Israelites could be victorious. We never hear of Hur again. So the rabbis say Hur tried to prevent the people from building this idol, and he was killed. He was slaughtered, Zavuach, slaughtered by the people, and Aaron saw the anger of the people and therefore acquiesced and built the altar, they built the golden calf. So just the creativity of the rabbis to create a story to help us understand, according to the rabbis, how we see Aaron in the story and how we understand the anger of the people. Paul is going to continue for us here. So the golden calf happens. Moses smashes the tablets and goes up the mountain again to pray on the people's behalf. And once some kind of assurance from God that God will be with him and that this mission to lead the people into Israel will succeed. So we're going to continue in what is designated as the fourth Aliyah. Paul will read the fourth Aliyah for us, which is on page 539, beginning with, it's chapter 33, beginning with verse 17. Go ahead, Paul.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה גם עשה דבר הזה אשר דיברת אעשה כי מצא חן בעיני ואדעך בשם ויאמר הריני נא את כבודך ויאמר אני אעביר כל טובי על פניך וקראתי בשם אדוני לפניך לכנוסי את אשר אכן וריחמתי את אשר ארחם Vayomer lo sucha laros es panai, ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. Vayomer Adonai hine makom iti, v'nitzavta al hatzur, v'haya ba'avor kavodi, v'samticha m'nikras hatzur, v'sakosi chapi, olecha ad ovri, v'hasirosi es kapi, v'oriso hasacharoi, u'vanai lo yera'u.
So this is an important theological statement that God is saying to Moses here. Moses wants to see God face to face, to kind of say, you know, despite all this trouble I'm going through and frustration of leading this stubborn, stiff-necked people to the promised land, please, God, give me some assurance that I'm worthy of this. And God says, no one can see my face and live. I'll let you see my back. So God stations Moses behind this rock. God passes God's presence before Moses, and Moses is able to see God's back. There's a fascinating midrash on this in the Talmud, in the very first section of the Talmud, with this idea that about tefillin, how we wear tefillin when we pray the morning service every day. And the rabbis say, you know, it might be unusual and it look odd to wear tefillin. Have no fear, God wears tefillin too. And so what is in God's tefillin? Right, so not just that God is seen in human form, but so much so that God wears tefillin too. So we wear verses, we have verses in the boxes of the tefillin that remind us of the commandment to wear tefillin. What are in the verses in God's tefillin to remind God to be compassionate and merciful to the people of Israel. And it's even, we don't sing this song on Shabbat morning, but in traditional synagogues, Anim Zmirot, this traditional hymn sung at the end of the service before Adon Olam, is an alphabetical acrostic, and it has one line in there that what did Moses see when Moses saw God's back? Moses saw the tefillin knot on the back of God's head. Kesher tefillin, her'ah le'anav, is in that. The knot of the tefillin God showed to the humble one, the modest one, to Moses. So a lot of interesting theology that we could discuss about that. Does God have human form? What is the purpose of imagining God with human form, imagining God wearing tefillin, no less, etc. So here Moses, God has Moses engrave the second set of tablets, and the covenant is recommitted to with the mentioning of Shabbat and holidays that are to be observed as well. And then in the last Aliyah, we're told that Moses comes down, Paul is going to read what is designated as the seventh Aliyah for us. We're told that Moses comes down the mountain with rays of light emanating from his face. So if we turn to page 545, verse 29, we see this important verse. Vayehi beredet Moshe mehar Sinai. This is chapter 34, verse 29. And so it came to pass when Moses went down Mount Sinai, Ushnei luchot ha'edut biyad Moshe, and the two tablets of testimony were in the hands of Moses, the Ridato minahar, as he came down the mountain. Moshe lo yadad. Moses didn't know ki karan or panav b'dabro ito, that rays of light emanated from his face, or the skin of his face was radiant, but rays of light emanating from the skin of his face when he was speaking with God. Now, so then God fashions a veil to put over Moses's face so that these rays of light don't damage the average, less spiritual Israelite. So the experience of Moses being with God caused these rays of light to emanate from Moses's face. Now, the fascinating thing about this is that the word for ray of light, Karen, is also a horn. a horn of an animal, like any horn, a ram's horn, a goat's horn, whatever animal has horns from their head, that's called a keren, that horn. And so the Latin translation of this actually says horns of light. Horns emanated from his face. And so that's why Moses is depicted sometimes as horns from his head, and why Jews were understood to have horns on our heads. It's because of the mistranslation of this. Why else do you need a veil over your face? Do you need a veil to cover horns that come out of your head? No, you need a veil to kind of protect the light that's emanating from your face. It's clearly rays of light emanating from his skin, but the Latin did not translate it that way. And because of that, the anti-Semitic trope that Jews have horns on their head, and people tell stories of being in the army, Jews being in the army and non-Jews meeting Jews for the first time in the barracks, putting their hands on the Jews' heads to feel for the horns. Where are your horns? All from this verse right here. And so from a mistranslation. So Paul's going to read the seventh Aliyah for us, beginning at the bottom of 544, Exodus chapter 34, verse 27, until the end of the portion. Paul.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה כתוב לך הדברים האלה כי על פי הדברים האלה קראתי איתך בריס בארץ ישראל ויהי שם עם אדוני 40 יום ו40 לילה לחם לא אכל מים לא שתה ויכתוב על הלוחות דברי הבריס עשרת הדברים ויהי Veredes Moshe mehar Sinai, Ushne luchos ha'edus biyad Moshe, Veredato min ha'hor, Moshe lo yada, Ki koran, or panav b'dabro ito, Vayar Aharon v'chol b'nei Yisrael es Moshe b'nei koran, or panav, Vayar umigeshes elav, Vayakra alehem Moshe, Vayoshuvu elav, Aharon v'chol hanisim b'oidah, וידבר משה עליהם, ואחרי כן ניגשו כל בני ישראל, ויצווים אש, כל אשר דיבר אדוני איתו בהר סיני, ויכל משה מדבר איתם, ויתן על פניו מסווה. ובבוא משה לפני אדוני לדבר איתו, יסיר את המסווה עד שיסו, ויצא, דיבר אל בני ישראל אש אשר יצווה, or Ubnei Israel's Penei Moshe, Ki Koran, or Penei Moshe, Veshiv Moshe es Hamasve al Panav, Ad Bo'o Ledaber Ito.
So today is one of the special Shabbatot between the beginning of the month of Adar and Passover. Today is Shabbat Parah, and we turn ahead in our Chumashim for the special Maftir. Had we been in the synagogue and been safe to be together, we would have taken 2 Torah scrolls out of the ark. The first one, we would have read Kitisa. The second one, this portion from the book of Numbers, chapter 19, which is the beginning of the portion Chukat. In Eitz Chaim, we're on page 880. Whatever edition of Chumash you have, you want to turn ahead to the portion Chukat. The book of Numbers, chapter 19. And here's a description of this unique, unusual ceremony that would have to occur for those who come into contact with the dead. And so this is very, very unusual for us today, but in the time of the rabbis and before, spiritual purity is related to physical purity. It has nothing to do with cleanliness or hygiene. Some of the laws of purity could be understood that way, that they are hygienic or sanitary. It really has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the idea that our bodies are holy vessels, and when something unusual happens to our body, or when we die, something about that holiness emanates from the body or is affected in some way, and it has to be corrected. Or if we come into contact or near a dead body, we ourselves who have come into contact with that need to be corrected as well. So this whole process of correction, of purification, is what the book of Leviticus is all about and what this ceremony is about. The contact with the dead is not physical contact, actually touching the body, but also being in the presence under a tent with the body. You only have to touch the body if you're in the same building or the same tent. That makes you ritually impure. And we read about this today on this Shabbat, always a few weeks before Passover, because all of Israel came to Jerusalem in order to offer the Passover sacrifice, which had to be done in a state of ritual purity. And the most common impurity is the contact with the dead. And so this bizarre ceremony of taking an unusually colored cow, a young cow, slaughtering it, burning it completely on the altar, mixing its ashes with other ingredients, and then sprinkling that on the people, anybody who has contamination by a corpse, then becomes ritually pure, which in the process of this ceremony makes the Kohen who is doing the purification impure, and then he has to become purified once again. So it's this whole purification process, which is hard for us to understand today. We only have symbolic elements of it when we wash our hands before we say Hamotzi, or when we wash our hands upon departing a cemetery, which sometimes is carried over to washing our hands before going into a Shiva house. But it's really about leaving the cemetery and then going to the next stop, which is the Shiva house. So either at the cemetery or at the house, we symbolically wash our hands to remind us, and Kohanim today might carry on their extra purification status by not entering a cemetery. All of these are symbolic, because all of us in one way or another have come into contact with the dead just by walking into a hospital, because almost every hospital has a place in the hospital where patients who have died are kept. And so almost invariably everybody in the world is in this, and that we are all impure. But this whole because the temple doesn't exist, these laws no longer, most of these purification laws don't apply anymore. But it's still, we read it for the historical connection with the holiday, the ancient connection with the Passover sacrifice, and that maybe someday the temple will be rebuilt and we will understand these laws of purification again. So the Maftir, this reading about Shabbat Parah, is on page 880. It's the first 22 sentences of chapter 19, and Paul will read this for us.
Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe v'Aharon lemor, zos bukas haTorah asher tziva Adonai lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael, v'yilchu elecha haftarah adumah tamimah, asher imachmu asher lo ala leha'ol, unasatem asah el Elazar haKohen, v'hotzi asah el michus lamachaneh v'shacharos al lefanav, v'lakachta Elazar haKohen midabah be'etzba'o, Visa El Nochach B'nei Ohel Moed Minama Sheva Pamim V'sarapes Haparola Einav Esarava Es B'sarava Es Tamal Pirshach Yisrov L'Kach HaKohen Eitzer Rez Vezo V'Shnisa Lo'as V'Hishlich El Toch Srefas HaPara V'Chibes B'Godav HaKohen Rachatz B'Sarov B'Mayim V'Achar Yovo El Machaneh V'Tameh HaKohen Ad Ha'arev Hasaref osa yichaves b'kodav b'mayim rachatz b'sarav b'moyim v'tamei ad ha'arev v'asaf yishtohor eisef ha'parah v'hiniach v'chutz l'machaneh b'makom tahor v'haisah La'adas b'nei Yisrael mishmeres l'meini dal chatos hi. V'chibes o sefer hapara es b'gadol v'tamei ad ha'oreb Isa livnei Yisrael. Lager hagol b'socham l'chukas salam. Anogei b'meis l'chol nefesh adam v'tamei shivas yamim. V'yischat avav hayom hashlishi v'yom hashvi yitor. If lo yischat v'yom hashlishi v'yom hashvi lo yitor. Kol hanogei b'meis b'nefesh adam asheyamus v'lo yischat. Es mishkan Adonai timei v'nichrasa hanefeshim Yisrael ki meini dolos rakalav tamei od tumasavo zos haTorah adam kemus ba'ohel kol ba'el ha'ohel v'chol asher ba'ohel yitma shivas yamim v'chol kalif asuach asher ein samit fasil alav tamei hu v'chol asher yiga al panei hasadeh Achalal cherev o b'meis o b'etzem adam o b'kover yitma shivas yamim v'lachu latomei me'afar sreifas achatos v'nasan olav mayim chayim el keli v'lokach ezo v'tolva b'mayim ishtor v'hiza al ha'ohel v'al kol ha'kelim al hanafashos asher yusham al hanogeya v'etzem o v'cholol o b'meis o b'kover He's a hatahor al hatamei bayom hashlishi bayom hashvi'i v'chit o bayom hashvi'i v'chi ves b'gadav rachatz b'mayim v'taher ba'orev v'ish asher yidma v'lo yischata v'nechrasa hanefesh ahimi toch alcohol ki es mikdash Adonai timei meini da los harak alav tamehu v'haisol lahem l'chukas olam u'mazeh mehani da yichabes b'gadav Hanogei v'mehani da yitma ad ha'arev v'chol asher gabo hatamei yitma v'hanefesh hanaga'as tidma ad ha'arev.
Yasher koach to Paul for reading all these portions of the Torah for us this morning. Just so happens to be the anniversary of my bar mitzvah, Kitisan Shabbat Parah, only 46 years ago, and just so happens to be the anniversary of my oldest daughter's bar mitzvah too, 18 years ago for my oldest daughter, Ellie Shevin. So I was kind of mouthing along to the maftir with Paul, knowing most of it by heart for so many years. Before we get to the Haftarah this morning, which is in the back of the Chumash on 1287, the Haftarah for Shabbat Parah, whatever Chumash you are using, look for the Shabbat Parah Haftarah taken from Ezekiel chapter 36. Before we do that, I'll recite the prayer for those who are ill. The Mishaberach, which is on page 173 in the Lev Shalem, 144 in Sim Shalom. Please unmute yourselves, but don't say anything until I call on you, please, because just know when you're unmuted, all sounds that you might be making, everybody is going to hear. So I have a list of names, and then I'll call on you one by one as I go around each screen and ask you to say the names that you have as well. Mishaberach Avatenu Avraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov B'Imotenu Sarif Terach Aliyah V'Yivarech V'Yirpei Et HaCholim Shmuel Ben Karet Penina Bat Hanaleah Simbat Tzivia Bat Zelda Tzipachana Bat Golda Ruth Bat Sarah Nes Gildor Ben Shoshana Shlomo Ben Golda Tzivia Sarah Bat Simalea Simchanatan Ben Risa Chana V'Yirpei Issa Rachel Penina Bat Ariella Tzipor Sheva Bat Rezel Batya Bat Esther Bernice Kisler, Gabriel Ben Batya, Yehuda Ben Leah, Fruma Dereda Bat Zisha, Malka Chava Bat Tzivia Sarah, Batya Bat Rivka, Gloria Hyacinth, Howard Salter, Shira Elisheva Bat Sarah, Yosef Shlomo Ben Batya, Devorah Sheshel Bat Chaya Rachel, Yaakov Hirsch Ben Tzipora, Batya Tzira Bat Sheva, Rezel Bat Esther, Zeb Ben Chaya, Bela Chana Bat Vega, Steve Resnick, Eric Kramer, Gedalia Ben Chaya, Huna Ben Sarah, Chaya Bat Leah, Cantor Adina and Glenn. Can't hear you for some reason. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Yeah, now I hear you.
Okay. Gretchen Marianne Klein, Livia Bat Rachel, Reuven Asher Ben Leah, Marie Swanson, Rena Bat Gabriella.
Ruth Adina bat Sarah, Rachel bat Leah, Rachel bat Yolanda, Gershon ben Freya, Baruch ben Rachel, Yirmiyahu, Aryeh ben Rachel, and Ronald Philadelphia.
And Audrey Haber.
Ed Klawonsky and Walter Simon.
Florence and David Polinsky.
Anna Barchana, Alan Bromfeld.
Jules or Judy, do you have a name? I think.
Eileen Schoenfeld.
Rita Rubenstein.
Sarah bat Freda Rivka, Sila bat Zipporah, Ron ben Gita, Sylvia bat Sarah, Brina Freda, bat Mildred, Chaya Pnina bat Dina, Dahlia bat Michaela bat Gertrude, Brindy bat Ruth.
Dad.
Moshe ben Miriam, Minda Fruma bat Malka Fredel, Svia Chaya bat Chana, Mordechai ben Shprinza Pessel, Dova Chava bat Chaya Elka, Gavriel Velvel ben Chaya Elka.
Margie.
Avraham ben Fruma Elka.
Marv Levy.
Melissa Zalvin Mendelson, Evan York, Jay Blumenthal.
And Danny Ben.
Adrian Persson and Alvin Ben.
Charlotte Petoskey.
Donna Cohn, Beverly Tillis, Ricky Weiser, Michael Weiser, Elaine Petoskey, and Irene Hickler.
Elizabeth Alcoba.
Mirka Yohaved bat Shalimit, Joyce, Kate, Bunny Golsinger, and Karen Wooden.
Al Kleiman.
Elaine Daniels.
And just a second here. Howard Rummerman.
Tracy Eisenhecht and Elaine Paraco.
And Howie Horowitz.
Chanaleah bat Soshi and Shoshana bat Sarah.
And Arnie Greenland, you're not unmuted, but you usually have a name. So unmute yourself.
Abraham Ben Zelda, Peter Weiss.
Okay, and I think that's everybody who's unmuted. The Kol HaCholim B'Kihilatenu HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleihem L'Hachazikam L'Rabotam Yishlach Lahem Mehera Refuah Shlema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Shar HaCholim V'chazek Et Yidei HaOskim B'tzorcheihem Shabbat Yimil Zokor Refuah Krova Lavo Hashar B'Gav Zman Kariv and Amar Amen. The Debbie Friedman song. Mishe Be'rachavotenu Mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength to bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishe be'rachimotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. So as I said, the Haftarah is in the back of our Chumash in the Eitz Chaim. It begins on page 1287. The Torah portion, the Maftir talked about the physical ceremony that was required in order to be purified. And Ezekiel, in this part of his book, there's the prophecy of shares the prophecy of how we become spiritually pure. So there's a physical purification process, and there's a spiritual purification, which without the temple in Jerusalem, we are left with how we can be spiritually pure. So my father is going to chant the Haftarah in honor of his granddaughter, the anniversary of her bat mitzvah, and I guess in honor of my bar mitzvah, the anniversary of my bar mitzvah too. And again, we're on 1287 in the Chumash. Blessings before and after the Haftarah found in Lev Shalem on 175 and Sim Shalom, the bottom of 146 and 147. Go ahead, John.
I can confirm that what Jonah just said is in honor of the two anniversaries in the family, Mazel Tov. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo u'v'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Vayhi dvar Adonai Elai lemor ben Adam Beit Yisrael yoshvim al admatam vayatamu otah v'darkam uva'alilotam ketumat hanida hayata darkam lefanai va'ashpo chamati aleihem al hadam asher shaftu al haaretz uvegilu lehem timuha va'afid sotam vagoyim vayizaru ba'aratzot kedarkam v'chalilotam shafatatim vayavo el hagoyim asher ba'u sham vayachalalu et shem kodshi be'emor lahem Amadonai ele ume'artzo yatza'u Va'echmol al shem kodshi asher chilaluhu Beit Yisrael bagoyim asher ba'u shama lachein emor leveit Yisrael ko amar Adonai Elohim lo lamanchem ani oseh Beit Yisrael Ki'im l'shem kodshi asher chilaltem v'goyim asher batem sham v'kidashti et shemi hagadol hamahulal b'goyim asher chilaltem b'tocham v'yadu hagoyim ki ani Adonai ne'um Adonai Elohim v'hi kodshi v'achem l'eineihem V'lakachti etchem min hagoyim, v'kibatzti etchem mikol ha'aratzot, v'heveti etchem el admatchem, v'zorakti aleichem mayim tahorim utahartem, mikol tumotechem, umikol gilulechem ataher etchem. V'natati lachem lev chadash v'ruach chadasha etain b'kirbechem v'hasiroti et lev ha'even mibasarchem v'natati lachem lev basar v'ruchi etain b'kirbechem v'asiti et asher b'chukai telechu u'mishpatai tishmeru v'asitem Vishavtem ba'aretz asher natati lavotechem v'hitem li la'am va'anochi eyelachem le'elohim v'hoshati etchem mikol tumotechem v'karati al hadagan v'hirbeti oto v'lo etain aleichem ra'av v'hirbeti et peri ha'etz Utenuvat hasadeh leman asher lo tikachu od cherpat ra'av bagoyim uzachartem et darchechem hara'im u'malalechem asher lo tovim unakotatem b'fnechem al avonotechem v'al toavotechem Lo lemanchem ani oseh ne'um Adonai Elohim yivada lachem bo shu v'hikalmu midarchehem Beit Yisrael ko amar Adonai Elohim b'yom tahari etchem mikol avonotechem v'hoshavti et ha'arim v'nivnu hechoravot v'haaretz haneshama Te'aveh tachat asher hayata shemama le'nei kol over v'amru ha'aretz halezu haneshama hayata kegan Eden v'ha'arim hecharevot v'haneshamot hanerasot b'tzurot yashavu v'yadu hagoyim asher yisharu sevivotechem ki ani Adonai ba'aniti hanerasot natati haneshama ani Adonai dibarti v'asiti ko amar Adonai Elohim od zot Yidaresh Leveit Yisrael la'asot lahem arbe otam katzon adam katzon kodashim katzon Yerushalayim b'moadeha kein tiyena ha'arim ha'charavot le'ot tzon adam ve'yadu ki ani Adonai Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sur kol haolamim tzadik bechol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yoseh ha'medaber u'mekayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad midavarecha achor la yashuv rekam ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata baruch ata Adonai ha'el ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav rachem al Tzion ki hi beit chayenu v'lalu vat nefesh toshia b'mehera v'yameinu Baruch ata Adonai Sameach Tzion Bivaneha Samcheinu Adonai Eloheinu Be'eliyahu Hanavi Avdecha U'v'malchut Beit David Meshichecha B'mehera Yavo V'yagel Libeinu Al Kiso Lo Yeshev Zar V'lo Yinchalu Od Acherim Et Kavodo Ki V'shem Kodshecha Nishbata Lo Shelo yichbed neiro le'olam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai Magei David Al HaTorah V'al HaVodah V'al HaNevi'im V'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh Shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu L'kedusha v'limnucha L'chavod u'letif'aret Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach u'mavarachim otach yitbarach shimcha befi chochai tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch ata Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. Nice to wish a Yasher Koach and a Mazel Tov to my father for chanting the Haftarah this morning. It's only a few years ago. I can picture myself on the bima at Temple Bethel in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I have one of those B'nai Mitzvah pictures on the wall in the dining room, and my father and I have a little bit more hair than we do now in that picture, and dressed beautifully, stylishly in our polyester suits. And so it's, anyway, poo. Thank God we're healthy to be able to celebrate this occasion today. So we continue with prayers for community, country, and Israel. And I asked a few people who are observing yard sites either today or during or this past week to read the prayers for us. So first, Steve Isaac, who is going to read in memory of his mother. His yard site for his mother is today. So he's going to read for us the prayer for the community, which is found on page 176 in Lev Shalem or 148 in Sim Shalom. Steve.
May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless this entire congregation together with all other holy congregations. They, their families, and all that is theirs, along with those who devote themselves to establish synagogues for prayer, as well as those who enter them to pray, and those who provide for their maintenance, wine for Kiddush and Havdalah, food for guests, bread for the hungry, tzedakah for the poor, and shelter for the homeless, and all who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of this community and the land of Israel. May the Holy One reward them, remove sickness from them, heal them, and forgive their sins. May God bless them by making all their worthy endeavors prosper, as well as those of the entire people Israel, their brothers and sisters, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. And Susan Goldsamt, in memory of her mother. Her mother's yahrzeit was earlier this week. She'll read for us the prayer for our country on 177 in Lev Shalem, or the bottom of 148 in Sim Shalom. Susan. You have to unmute yourself, Susan.
Okay, done.
There you go.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessing upon its land, upon its inhabitants, upon its leaders, its judges, officers, and officials who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the public. Help them understand the rules of justice you have decreed, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. Adonai, God, whose spirit is in all creatures, we pray that your spirit be awakened within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from our hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant love and companionship, peace and friendship among the many peoples and faiths who dwell in our land. Grant us the knowledge to judge justly, the wisdom to act with compassion, and the understanding and courage to root out poverty from our land. May it be your will that our land be blessing to all who dwell on earth, and may you cause all people to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Susan. You can mute yourselves again. And Kessler is going to read for us the prayer for the state of Israel on 178 in Lev Shalem at the top of 149 in Sim Shalom, also in memory of his mom. George.
Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, stronghold and redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel, that it may be the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown them, efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy, and let us say amen.
Amen. So thank you, George, Susan, and Steve, and may those you remember today always be a source of blessing and comfort for you. And we continue with Ashrei, 181 in Lev Shalem, 151 in Sim Shalom.
אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללוך סלה.
אשרי העם שככה לו, אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו.
תהילה לדוד, ארוממך אלוהי המלך, ואברך שמך לעולם ועד.
וכל יום אברכך ויהללה שמך לעולם ועד.
גדול אדוני ומהולל מאוד, ולגדולתו אין חקר.
ולדור ישבח מעשיך, גבורותיך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך, ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
ועזוז נרותיך יאמרו, גדולתך אספרנה.
זכר אב טובך יביעו, וצדקתך ירננו.
ענן ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדל חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
יבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני האדם גבורותיו, וכבוד הדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
תומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך ומשפיע לכל רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קרוב, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשה, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
אומר אדוני את כל אוהביו, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד.
תהילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד. ואנחנו נברך יח, מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah.
Instead of a Devar Torah, which I've been giving at this point in the service, we'll be hearing from Mira Mendick at the end of the service in relation to this being Refugee Shabbat. So we'll continue by rising, if we can, for Chatzi Kaddish for Musaf, 184 in Lev Shalem, 155 in Sim Shalom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה, ועלמא דברה קירותך, וימליך מלכותך בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמך רבה מברך, לעלם לעלמי עמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמך דקודשה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעלמה, ואמרו
Amen. We start the Amida out loud on the next page.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ופוקד, ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומלך ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
הארץ חברת תשחק סוציית שרפי קודש, אמרתי שמשמך בקודש כך כתוב על יחד זה על זה ויאמר.
נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
שעתיו שרים זעזע מכפרו ומתם ברוך תמיד.
כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים זה לזה איה מקום כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך אדוני ממקומו. ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחון עם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביהבה שמע אומרים שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם. ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue silently in Lev Shalem 188 to 192, in Sim Shalom 158 to 161.
As we conclude our private prayers, we continue with Sim Shalom, page 191 in Lev Shalem, or the top of 161 in Sim Shalom.
שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד, אהבת חסד וצדקה ורחמים וחיים ושלום. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום בעולם, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
Amen. We continue with Kaddish Shalem, the full Kaddish, 203 in Lev Shalem, 181 in Sim Shalom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה, בעלמא דברה קירותך, וימליך מלכותך בחייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכו בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו, אמן. יהי שמך רבה מברך, לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך דקודשה, בריחו להילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא, ואמרו אמן. תתקבל צלותיהן ובאותיהן לכל ישראל, קדם אבוהן דיבי שמיה ואמרו אמן. יש למה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. אין כאלוהינו, אין כאדוננו, אין כמלכנו, אין כמושיענו, מי כאלוהינו, מי כאדוננו, מי כמלכנו, מי כמושיענו, נודה לאלוהינו, נודה לאדוננו, נודה למלכנו, נודה למושיענו, ברוך אלוהינו, ברוך אדוננו, ברוך מלכנו, ברוך מושיענו, אתה הוא אלוהינו, אתה הוא אדוננו, אתה הוא מלכנו, אתה הוא מושיענו, אתה הוא שהקטירו אבותינו לפניך את קטורת הסמים. יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה, יאללה לה 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 לה. אמר רבי אלעזר, אמר רבי חנינא, תלמידי חכמים שנאמר. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת. אין עוד, אין עוד. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
I'll read the names of yard sites that are observed in our congregation today through the coming week, as well as names of people we still remember within 30 days after the funeral. After I read these names, then Cantor Adina will recite the Almale, the memorial prayer in their memory. So we remember today Herman Kensky, Chaim Abba, Ben Tzvi, Rachaleah, Stan Smith, Shlomo Herschel, Ben Moshe, Golda Fred Trackman, Ephraim Ben Yaakov, Golda, Sandra Gershman. Yard sites for today and this coming week are Sylvia Isaac, Shirley Goldstein, Lydia Gordon, Max Weinstein, Meir Ben Menachem Mendel Halevi, Joseph Brown, Yosef Ben David Ruvain, Barry Sandra Greenfeld, Burl Hirschman, David Baird Ben Levi Halevi, Louis Hale, Leib Ben Nachum, Adam Lilling, David Posner, Rose Sandick, Fanny Kostman, Alexander Weisberg, Alexander Ben Yaakov, Pinchas Arbor, Philip Marshall Aronson, Pinchas Mendel Ben Zeb Wolf, Rose Keel Burkhalter, Paul Dick, Pinchas Ben Hirsch Berchaya, Alan Glazer, Jacob Camero, Yaakov Ben Abraham, Ed Neufeld, Aaron Ben Baruch Berifka, Louis Perry, Label Ben Nachman Halevi, Stuart Patel, Eli Ringer, Hillel Ben Yosef Leib, Edith Sandler, Anna Leah Schulman, Hannah Leah Bat Baruch Leib, Be'etel, Minnie Saidi Bubis, Minya Bat Natan, Sigmund Lieberman, Zavel Yosel Ben Levi Vasara, Rebecca Cantor Myers, Rivka Bat Herschel, Ora Yoles, Ida Bass, Chaya Bat Reb Moshe Shlomo, Max Feldman, Arnold Hagler, Rose Kruger, Rachel Bat Reb Yehuda, Eva Rachel Ringer, Chava Rachel Bat Beryl Lipa, Hyman Rock, Sidney Silverman, Mordechai Shimon Ben Zundel, Leo Sussman, Nathaniel Swirsky, Nachum Ben Shepsel, Lawrence Charles Cornfield, Leib Tzaddik Ben Herschel, Richard Judah Hollander, Yehuda Ben Shimon HaKohen, Edith Lopatin, Gilbert Rubenstein, Jacob Hyman Rubenstein, Yaakov Chaim Ben Yitzchak, Harry Auerbach, Morris Geiger, Margaret Mordfin, Mariasha Bat Gershom, Theodore Barry Asheroff, Tevya Bear Ben Sion, James Allen Ross, Aharon Michel Ben Chaim Hirsch Besimcha, Bessie Sherman, and Michael Zaitchik.
El malei rachamim, shochen b'meromim, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanefei hashechina, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע המזהירים. לנשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה, שהלכו לעולמם בגן עדן, תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני ונחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר אמן.
Mourners and those observing yard sites rise for Mourners Kaddish 207 and Lev Shalem 184 in Sim Shalom. V'yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah v'yomad yibrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kariv imru amen. Hey Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Omel Maya Yibarach V'yishtabach V'yipa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yihadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei D'Kudashah B'richu V'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechamata Da'amiran Be'alma V'imru Amen. Hey Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Shalom V'roma V'yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Just a couple of announcements before we conclude our service and before we hear from Mira Mendick, which we are looking forward to in honor of Refugee Shabbat. We're going to hear from Cheyenne Feldman as well, who's going to lead us in Adon Olam momentarily. And I'll put the Lanskys on the spot, maybe at the very end, Jonah and Josh, if you would do Kiddush at the end. After Mira is done talking, we'll do Kiddush at that point. So just a thumbs up. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. We want to wish a Yasher Koach to Cantor Adina for leading us this morning, and to all those who participated in the service today, to Paul for reading Torah, to my father for chanting the Haftarah, to Steve, Susan, and George for reading the prayers, and to Cheyenne, like I said, who momentarily will lead us in Adon Olam. This evening, two things we have on tap. One, Shabbos is over a little bit before 10 to 7. So at 6:50, we'll have evening service and Havdalah. And then to continue the Refugee Shabbat, Hayas is running a national Havdalah program with beautiful singing and prayers at 8 o'clock this evening. Just go to the shul calendar page or to the email that I sent yesterday for the appropriate link to. You have to register for free, and then you'll get a specific email back that is only, I can't post the email that I got because it only works for me. So you all, if you want to attend that 8 o'clock program, you have to register, and then an email, a Zoom link is sent to you specifically. Sunday, we have the usual 8:45 service and adult education classes as well, and religious school online. 4 o'clock, Mara Lansky and Stuart Carroll together are leading the Makers and Bakers. Stuart sharing his mother's, may she rest in peace, his mother's famous mandel bread recipe. And Mara is sharing a macaroon recipe as well. So you can register for that through the Eventbrite. Just go to the calendar page on the shul website to 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and you'll see how to register for the program. And Monday evening, AJC, American Jewish Committee, will be presenting a program on their study, which they just conducted, of the American community about attitudes towards anti-Semitism. Disturbing and fascinating at the same time. That'll be 8 o'clock Monday evening, which you can register as well through the shul calendar page, because it's the AJC Zoom link that you'll be sent. It's not something that we are hosting, it's AJC hosting on our behalf. Everything else is in the shul weekly update page, which I hope you all have received, but that you can also access on the shul website as well. So Cheyenne, unmute yourself and lead us in Adon Olam, which we can find on page 211 in Lev Shalem, or 187 in Sim Shalom.
Adon Olam, Asher Malach, V'terem Kol, Yitzir Nivra, Leit Nasa, V'chapsako, Azai Melech Shemo Yikra Adon Olam, V'yacharei Yichlot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nara Adon Olam, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hoveh, V'hu Yeh B'tifara Adon Olam, Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nibra Le'Nasa V'Chafsa Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'Hu Echad V'Yein Sheni L'Ham Shilo L'Hach V'Ra Adon Olam V'Li Reshit V'Li Tachlit V'Lo Ha'oz V'Ham Yisra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nibra Le'Nasa V'Chafsa Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'Hu Eli V'Chai Go'ali V'Torchav Li V'Yetzara Adon Olam V'Hu Nisi U'Manos Li Menakasim B'Yom Hakra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nibra Le'Nasa V'Chafsa Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'Yado Akidruchi V'Yetisham V'Yayira Adon Olam V'Yimruchi Yiviyati Adonai Li V'Yohira Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nibra Le'Nasa V'Chafsa Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam.
Yasher Koach Cheyenne, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let's stay muted, please. I'm going to introduce Mira Mendick in just a moment. I just want to provide a little bit of context for today and this Shabbat. So Hayas, which they're just known by the abbreviation now. It used to be the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, was set up in America 150 years ago in order to aid Jewish immigrants to America and the resettling here. And it became a global organization because it reached out to the countries from which Jews were coming from to help in the resettlement process in America. So Rita, before the service started, Rita Rubinstein said how she and her family were aided by Hayas after the Holocaust in the DP camps to help get to America. I know that in the 50s and 60s in Egypt, for example, and in France, the large wave of Egyptian Jews who were forced to leave Egypt went to France and received the help of Hayas in resettling in America as well. So Hayas, those are just two examples of many that Hayas has been involved in over the decades in the resettlement first of Jewish immigrants, and now they're involved more inclusively with all immigrants, all refugees who are seeking settlement in America. So just a little bit of info. There are now estimated to be more than 80 million people who have been forcibly displaced due to persecution and violence. The 80 million people in the world, 26.4 million of these people are refugees. 85% of these refugees are being hosted in developing countries, not in Western countries, but in developing countries. This is largely due to geography. These countries are closest to the conflict zones people are fleeing. Turkey is the country that hosts the most refugees at 3.6 million. 68% of the world's refugees come from just 5 countries. 6.6 million come from Syria, 3.7 million come from Venezuela, 2.7 million come from Afghanistan, 2.2 million come from South Sudan, and 1.1 million come from Myanmar. 40% of refugees are under the age of 18. Of the more than 80 million people estimated to be forcibly displaced from their homes, 30 to 34 million of them are estimated to be children below 18 years of age. 2 more things to know. The United States has been resettling refugees for decades. In the aftermath of World War II, Congress enacted the first refugee legislation, providing refuge to over 650,000 displaced Europeans. Since the U.S. resettlement program was formalized through the Refugee Act of 1980, the U.S. has resettled over 3 million refugees. The Refugee Act created the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, which is a public-private partnership between nonprofit organizations and the U.S. Department of State. It includes 9 national resettlement agencies, including HIAS, and a network of hundreds of local partner organizations that resettle refugees in communities around the country. So we are fortunate today to have one of the many people involved in this resettlement effort, and that is Mira Mendick, who happens to be the daughter of Naomi and David Yadin Mendick. Mira is the remote placement specialist for refugee resettlement with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, working to reunite refugees with their family and friends in the United States. She formerly worked for Lutheran Social Services of the National Capital Area as the Community Relations Director. So we're privileged to hear from Mira about the work she does for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and why she got involved in this and the work she does. So Mira, please.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. As Rabbi Layman said, my name is Mira Mendick and my parents, David and Naomi, are members. And I currently work for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, and I'm excited to be starting a position with HIAS in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
And as Rabbi Layman said, there are 9 national agencies in the US that do refugee resettlement, all with offices all over the country. And I'll soon have worked for 3 of the 9 agencies. All of these agencies administer the same program funded by the State Department, and it's called the Reception and Placement Program. This is a 90-day program that starts with securing housing before refugees arrive, picking them up at the airport, getting them enrolled in public benefits such as food stamps and Social Security, referring them to ESL, and then just generally helping them get settled here. Refugees also receive $1,125 as part of this program, and that's supposed to cover things like rent and transportation until they reach self-sufficiency, which is expected by the 90th day. While this program is only 90 days, refugees can be enrolled in employment services for up to 5 years after their arrival. I started working in resettlement in the summer of 2016, and at that point, Obama had set the refugee admission ceiling, which the president sets on an annual basis at 85,000 refugees. As soon as Trump took office, arrivals drastically dropped. Not only did he set the ceiling incredibly low at just 15,000 refugees in his last year in office, but also things like the Muslim ban had a huge impact on who could be resettled here. This is also at a time when there are 26 million refugees worldwide. I'm feeling hopeful under the new administration. Biden has committed to setting the ceiling at 125,000 refugees for next fiscal year, which is really great. But that being said, we still need to continue to do better. Just for some background information, again, as Rabbi Layman did say, the top source countries for refugees are Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. And the top host countries are Turkey, Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, and Germany. I hope we can see the US on this list in the coming years. My primary responsibility in this field has always revolved around community outreach. I think this is important for a few reasons. I think having community engagement and resettlement can play a significant role in a refugee's integration and their sense of community. It also plays a big role in advocacy efforts and creating welcoming communities across the country. It's likely in the next year we will see a pilot program for private sponsorship, which will mean that groups like a synagogue can provide support services for a refugee, and it will increase capacity of resettlement in the US. I don't currently know so much about the needs of refugees in Maryland because I'm working at the national level, but there are 3 resettlement agencies in Maryland: Lutheran Social Services, the International Rescue Committee, and Ethiopian Community Development Council. And there are also other organizations that provide additional services. I encourage you to reach out and get involved, either as individuals or as a synagogue, as these organizations are stretched thin and they have very limited resources. Volunteer opportunities include things like helping set up apartments for arriving refugees, being a family mentor, helping drive to appointments, and so on. If you are interested, definitely feel free to reach out to me after Shabbat and I can connect you. That's all I have for right now. Thank you so much for having me speak today in honor of Refugee Shabbat, and I'm happy to take some questions.
So thank you very much, Mira. There are lots of aspects of this that we could ask questions about. I just wanted to frame this in a little way, a bit, and also to see how best we can take questions. If you're comfortable using technology on Shabbat, which obviously you are because you're all here on Zoom today, but if you're comfortable with how to use the chat, then the best way would be to type a question in the chat, and both Mira and I can see those questions. The other way would be to simply raise your hand. That might take a little bit longer for me to be able to see the question as I see that you have a question, because I have to shuffle through the screens to do that. You can also go to reactions on the bottom of your screen and actually raise your hand, and then a yellow hand will appear at the corner of your screen. As you're doing that, coming up, thinking of a question that you might want to ask Mira, let me just put a little context in this, that obviously refugee resettlement has become politicized. And I just want to take the politics out of it by saying that this is a religious imperative on the part of Judaism. We're told 36 times in the Torah, I've said that before, I said that last night, we're told 36 times in the Torah, we are reminded by God and Moses that we need to love the stranger who is in our midst, because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. So it is a basic foundational religious ethical imperative on our part to always be mindful of where people are coming from and to be welcoming to them, to ensure that they are integrated as fully as possible into our community. There's nothing political about that. It's just a matter of basic human behavior that we are taught in the Torah to do. And so, therefore, it's clearly understood why the Jewish community has been involved in this effort from the very beginning. I mean, just think about the first Jews who came to the United States in 1654. A boatload of Jews from the north coast of Brazil, escaping the Inquisition, that came to Brazil, finding a safe harbor in New Amsterdam. And they had to fend for themselves there and were left to the devices of the Dutch government that was running the New Amsterdam colony at the time. So from then on, this is just in America, how we've been involved. We've been, now it's not, you can say at the same time that the Jews have been our own worst enemies as we're resettling, because the German Jews in New York were not so happy about the Eastern European Jews coming in, but still were involved in leadership. David Torchinsky just told me the other day that his great-grandfather was among the founders of HIAS in New York City back in the 1800s. So we have a connection to HIAS. We have a connection religiously to the whole process of refugees and making the stranger welcome, so they're not strangers anymore. So now, if you have a question, please, again, either put it into the chat or raise your hand, like wave your hand so I can see if you have a question, and then I can call on you. Anybody have any questions or comments? So, well, Mira, how many, tell me about the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops and how they're involved in this resettlement process, and then how you managed to be steered there to get a job.
So the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is one of the 9 agencies, and they really all function very similarly in terms of refugee resettlement. They are one of the largest resettlement agencies. I think they used to be the largest, but I think IRC might be the largest right now. And I had been working at the local level for Lutheran Social Services, and a job opened up at the Conference of Catholic Bishops that involved doing outreach to nonprofits across the country that don't currently provide any refugee services, and doing outreach to them to provide services to refugees that are going to be resettling in places around the country where there isn't an established office. So the remote placement program is a family reunification program, and it reunites refugees coming here to reunite with their family members where family members live, where not close to an office.
Okay. And I know that Ellen King has her hand up, but let me just ask this. So there are 9 agencies that are taking care of refugee resettlement. Do they all share the work? Do they do, like, how do they coordinate their efforts?
So they all have the same contract, essentially, with the State Department. And there isn't so much coordination, I would say. The 9 agencies meet on a weekly basis every Wednesday morning. And it used to be in person. Right now they're meeting virtually. And every week they go around and they take cases, and then they distribute those cases to their offices around the country.
Okay. Ellen King, if you have a question, then unmute yourself.
I just have a question. You mentioned, Mira, that after 90 days, that's the extent of your help. What happens with these people who cannot get themselves established in 90 days? They can't get a job or they can't support themselves. Who helps them then?
That's a great question. I would start by saying that refugees are incredibly resilient people, and it is a huge ask to be self-sufficient at the 90th day, especially for refugees that are coming with really limited English, and also education doesn't transfer over typically. So it's definitely difficult, but also a large part of a refugee agency's responsibility is finding employment for refugees. And these are often really low paying jobs at first, but we also say your first job isn't going to be your job forever. It's just a starting place to get some experience in the US. But there are also other support services that refugees are eligible for. So as I mentioned, they can be enrolled in employment services for up to 5 years after arrival, and can stay enrolled in other public benefits. But I think that's also another reason that community support is so important, because the government can't be supporting refugees past the 90th day through this program. So the community needs to pick up some of that work.
That's okay. That's okay.
So Mira, you said that there is a pilot program that's going to be started for how synagogues can get involved. So before you tell me about that pilot program, I just want to acknowledge Wendy Abraham is on, and we know a couple of years ago, you might remember reading about her son, Rabbi Stephen Abraham, in Omaha, Nebraska, how through Lutheran services out there in Nebraska, helped adopt a Syrian refugee family there, find an apartment, provide furniture, meals, etc., and help them get settled into the community. I looked into trying to do that here, and I understand that in Montgomery County, Maryland, it's just like too expensive to do. There aren't affordable apartments, and it wasn't really doable. The closest would be to try to do it in PG County. So it never worked out. And I know that the Friends community, the Quakers, were involved with that here. So what is this pilot community thinking about, a pilot program thinking about doing?
So it's in its very early stages, and right now the agencies are really trying to think through what the program could look like, and we're not sure whether we're going to receive more direction from the State Department, or if it's going to be just propose your idea of what private sponsorship looks like and they'll award money to fund it. But essentially, I think it will be somewhat similar to the Canadian model of resettlement. So a group, it won't have to be likely an established organization. So it could be a group of friends can come together, a book group maybe. And instead of the refugee being resettled with a local organization, they would be resettled by that group of people. And those people would be required to raise the funds to cover resettlement. So at least the equivalent of at least the 1,125 would
Mhm.
have to go, they would have to raise, but I think they would also be responsible for, I believe they're thinking of like public benefits as well. So really taking the load off of the government, and money will be raised by individuals or groups. But also just in terms of right now we have co-sponsorship across the country, and some organizations have more structured programs than others. And there is co-sponsorship in Maryland through Lutheran Social Services. And it is true that it's hard to find affordable housing in Montgomery County. But there are a lot of organizations, a lot of synagogues, and a lot of churches that have in Montgomery County that have been co-sponsors. So if it is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to speak to the other congregations that have done it in Montgomery County, because a lot have and have been very successful.
Okay, we will do that. Any other questions? You may have noticed a couple comments in the chat, but any Michael, are you?
Yeah,
yes,
Rabbi, Mira, what about learning from the past? When the Jews came over here, you used to get every town with it, or not every town, but a lot of places formed Landsmannschaften. And the immigrants would head for the Landsmannschaft to help be acclimated to America. Has anybody considering the same idea?
I can't really speak to that. Really right now, resettlement is, the responsibility is placed on these organizations, the resettlement organizations across the country, and they're responsible for everything for the first 90 days and really helping refugees get settled, their cultural orientation, but it's very limited because organizations are stretched so thin and resettling sometimes right now, not high numbers, but ideally pretty high numbers of refugees and just a few staff members responsible for providing all of these services to many clients. Again, which I think is why community involvement can play a really big role in resettlement.
Is the idea to spread refugees from similar parts from the world across America, or to some extent concentrate them together so they can support each other as used to happen?
So there are a couple of things that factor into where a refugee is placed. One would be if they have a family or friend already in the States, then they will get placed near them or with them. And then if a refugee is coming and they don't have family or friends in the US, the agency will look at what language they speak, if they have any medical issues or disabilities, and then they will look at their offices around the country and try to pick a good fit. So typically an agency will place people from the same country in the same community because they need that kind of support.
It's an interesting point about the Landsmannschaft. I mean, these are decades from the 1880s until 1925, when there was a constant stream of Eastern European Jews coming into America. So that there was 40 years of time of creating these organizations. Here, this is not a this is crisis for Syrian, Venezuelan, South Sudanese, Myanmar communities, and hasn't been 40 years worth of stream of refugees. So I mean there are. So I'm just saying that's one major difference between the Landsmannschaft idea and this refugee issue, and certainly how to keep communities together. I just in terms of Syrian refugees, you assume that most of them would be Muslim. I remember that there are I had a presentation at a Board of Rabbis meeting when we could meet in person before COVID by someone working with the Muslim immigrant community, and there are Muslims from 192 countries in the Washington area who have come here as immigrants or as refugees. So it's not as united as we might think. Anyway, so it's a complicated process, but an important one, and it's it's good to hear the great work that Mira is doing, and perhaps how we as a synagogue community can be involved in this important work too. So thanks a lot, Mira, very much for sharing your words with us. And there you go. And your mother just shared something in the chat too about your family member as well. So yes, I'm sure we all have stories of either our grandparents, great-grandparents, ourselves, who came as immigrants to America, and how HIAS has helped us. Even more reason then for us to continue to be involved in helping others achieve the freedom that we all are endowed with. So let's conclude our service and have the Lanskys say Kiddush for us. We're at 3:15 in the Sim Shalom, or 77 in Lev Shalem. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael v'Shabbat l'asara Shabbat l'dor tam brit olam. B'nei Yovein b'nei Yisrael p'li olam kishesh yamim asar Adonai t'shamayim v'et haaretz. U'vayom hashvi Shabbat v'yinafash. Zachor yom ha'Shabbat l'kodsho shesh yamim tavod v'asida kom lachtecha. Yom hashvi Shabbat l'Adonai Elohecha. Lo taseh kom lacha atavim chavitecha avdecha v'amatcha v'emtecha. V'gercha shebisharecha. Kishesh yamim asar Adonai t'shamayim v'et haaretz v'et hayam v'kol asher bam v'yanach v'yom hashvi. Al Kain Beirach Adonai Yom HaShabbat Be'kadshehu Sabri.
Ayin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam borei pri hagafen.
Amen. Yasher koach, guys, and Shabbat Shalom. Thanks again, Mira. Thank you very much. And you can unmute yourselves, folks. And
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Myra.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hey, good talk.
Everybody.
Good talk, Mira.
Happy Bat Mitzvah, Jonah.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.
Happy birthday.
Shabbat Shalom.
My birthday is a couple of weeks ago, but yes, but thank you.
You don't look, you really don't look your age, Rabbi.
9, right?
Did you see the article in the Jewish Week about Sarah Tefillah? And,
Yes, and the mistakes they made in that article too.
Lots of mistakes.
Always.
Yeah, they referred to us once as Sharei Torah in the article, and referred to Perry Sander as Perry Nutter.
Yeah.
That I don't know, but yeah.
Did you say Shabbat Shalom?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shabbat Shalom, dear.
All right.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat
Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat
Shalom.
Good day, everyone.
Have a good week.
Shabbat Shalom. Great job,
Bye.
Jonah Lansky.
I actually called the Washington Jewish Week yesterday and left a message for the
Good.
person that wrote the article, but
Yeah.
I didn't hear back from her.
Okay.
But I mean, it was just ridiculous. Shari
Right.
Torah,
Yeah.
Perry
Yeah.
Nutter.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Who's Perry Nutter?
And
Yeah.
she even talked to Perry. And
Yeah.
but Perry said he spoke to her.
Yeah. So I wrote a comment at the bottom of the article.
Okay.
Oh, online.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really aggravated by that. I thought
You can also call David Hozel, the managing editor.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll print the correction next week.
Right. I mean, I wasn't going to write a letter to the editor. There's no point for that.
No,
but I
just
think that,
call him.
No,
Yeah.
but I did call there, but you really can't get through to anybody. I just
Right.
left a message. So
Yeah,
with
who's
my phone number,
answering
so
phones?
maybe someone will call. But anyway, Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Everyone.
Well.
Shalom, Mr. Koach, Rabbi Layman on the Haftarah.
Yeah.
You really don't look 19.